The taste of copper and ozone still fills my mouth from when I first heard the universe scream into our world's silence. My name is Governor Maltheus Korven of Quietus Prime, the last living witness to what happens when an entire planet discovers that reality has layers it never suspected existed. 2.7 billion souls lived in blissful ignorance, until the moment our mining operations breached something that wasn't stone, wasn't metal, but was infinitely hungry and completely mad. You think that makes me a heretic for speaking of forbidden truths, but you don't know what I've seen when the barriers between dimensions grow thin. The warp whisper isn't a sound you hear with your ears. It's a voice that speaks directly to the part of your soul you didn't know existed, telling you secrets about existence that no mortal mind was meant to comprehend. This is my testimony of the 17 days when Quietus Prime learned that silence was the only thing keeping us sane. Chapter 1. The Silent World. Quietus Prime had earned its name through 10,000 years of blessed mundanity, a world so thoroughly unremarkable that even the administratum's most obsessive record keepers struggled to find distinguishing characteristics worth cataloguing. The planet orbited a stable yellow star at optimal distance for human habitation, possessed a breathable atmosphere, and supported 2.7 billion citizens who lived their entire lives without experiencing anything more exciting than seasonal weather variations. I had governed this world for 37 years, presiding over agricultural quotas, mineral extraction schedules, and tithe assessments with the methodical precision that exemplified imperial efficiency. Quietus Prime produced grain, textiles, and low-grade metals with mechanical reliability, never exceeding expectations, but never falling short of obligations. It was a world that functioned exactly as the God Emperor intended, productive, obedient, and utterly free from the supernatural complications that plagued more notable planets. The capital city of Serenitas sprawled across the continent's central plains like a monument to organized mediocrity. Its hab blocks rose in precise geometric patterns, each structure identical to thousands of others, housing workers whose daily routines varied so little that decades could pass without meaningful change. The streets followed rigid grid systems that eliminated any possibility of getting lost, while the citizens moved through their lives with the same predictable patterns their ancestors had followed for centuries. "Another perfect day in paradise," Planetary Defense Coordinator Thaddeus Vex would joke during our morning briefings, his humor reflecting the gentle cynicism that characterized our world's attitude toward its own tedium. Vex had served in the Astra Militarum for 20 years before retiring to Quietus Prime, drawn by the promise of a posting where the most dangerous threat was paperwork deadlines. Our planetary defense consisted of a single PDF regiment equipped with lasguns that had never fired at anything more threatening than training targets. The weapon maintenance schedules were more concerned with preventing rust than maintaining combat readiness, since the probability of actual conflict on Quietus Prime approached mathematical impossibility. The most excitement we've had in 5 years was that shipping manifest discrepancy last summer. Chief Administratum Adept Cornelius Grex reminded me during our weekly review meetings. Grex had spent 40 years on Quietus Prime without witnessing a single event worth recording in his daily reports beyond routine bureaucratic procedures. The world's mining operations epitomized our commitment to safe, predictable resource extraction. The Korven Industrial Consortium, named after my family's 3 centuries of governance, operated 17 extraction sites across the planet's 3 major continents. Each site employed standard Imperial mining equipment to extract iron ore, copper deposits, and trace amounts of precious metals from geological formations that had been thoroughly surveyed and mapped. Mine foreman Marcus Tybalt supervised the largest operation, the Serenitas Deep Mine Complex, that descended 2.3 kilometers into the planet's crust through rock formations dating back millions of years. "Nothing but honest stone down there," Tybalt would report, with the satisfaction of a man whose greatest professional achievement was the complete absence of geological surprises. The miners themselves reflected our world's character: hard-working, reliable, and completely unimaginative. They descended into the earth each day with the casual confidence of men who had never encountered anything underground except mineral deposits and occasionally stubborn rock formations. Safety protocols focused on cave-in prevention and equipment maintenance, rather than any exotic threats. "Deepest we've ever gone, Governor," T-Bolt informed me during my monthly inspection of the primary excavation site. "The geology teams say we're approaching some unusual rock strata, but nothing that should cause operational difficulties." The unusual strata represented the most interesting development in Quietus Prime's recent history. Crystalline formations, unlike anything in our geological surveys, embedded in metamorphic rock that seemed to pulse with faint luminescence. The Planetary geologists had classified them as previously unknown mineral composites, possibly valuable enough to increase our tithe contribution to the Imperium. "Spectral analysis shows trace elements we can't identify," Chief Geologist Hadrian Voss reported with the excitement of a scientist discovering something genuinely novel. "The crystalline structure doesn't match any known mineral categories. Could be some form of exotic matter formed under unique pressure conditions." The discovery had generated considerable enthusiasm among our technical staff, who rarely encountered anything that challenged their professional expertise. Teams of geologists, metallurgists, and mining engineers descended into the deep excavations to examine the crystalline formations with instruments that had spent decades measuring perfectly ordinary rocks. "Recommend expansion of excavation parameters to fully expose the crystalline deposits," mining engineer Quietus Morse advised during technical briefings that had become surprisingly engaging. "We could be looking at the most significant mineral discovery in sector history." The civilian population remained blissfully unaware of the mining developments, their attention focused on seasonal harvest festivals, local sports competitions, and the endless administrative procedures that governed daily life on an imperial world. Children attended schools where they learned imperial doctrine, basic mathematics, and practical skills necessary for agricultural or industrial careers that would unfold with absolute predictability. The youth show appropriate dedication to imperial values, Education Supervisor Helena Cray reported with satisfaction during quarterly assessments. No signs of rebellious tendencies or inappropriate curiosity about subjects beyond their designated learning parameters. Our world's churches maintained the Emperor's worship with the same methodical precision that characterized every other aspect of Quietus Prime's civilization. Sermons followed traditional liturgies focused on duty, obedience, and gratitude for the peace that allowed ordinary humans to live ordinary lives without fear of extraordinary dangers. "The population demonstrates exemplary faith," Cardinal Maltheus Korven observed during religious census reviews. "Their devotion is strengthened by genuine appreciation for the stable existence the God Emperor provides to those who serve faithfully without seeking glory or adventure." The astropathic relay station operated by Adept Cassius Norn handled routine communications with Sector Command and neighboring systems. Messages typically concerned cargo schedules, tax assessments, and bureaucratic confirmations that reflected Quietus Prime's role as a perfectly functional cog in the Imperium's vast administrative machinery. "Communication traffic remains well within normal parameters," Norn reported during monthly assessments. "No messages of unusual urgency or content. The sector appears satisfied with our consistent performance. Even our planetary weather followed predictable patterns that agricultural planning could anticipate years in advance. Seasonal variations occurred within narrow ranges that never threatened crop yields or disrupted industrial operations. The atmosphere remained stable, the climate temperate, and the geological activity minimal. Environmental conditions optimal for sustained imperial productivity," planetary meteorologist Gaius Helm confirmed through reports that varied so little from year to year that previous assessments could be reused with minimal modification. No environmental factors that would disrupt normal civilian or industrial operations. The military barracks housed PDF troops whose training exercises focused on ceremonial drills and equipment maintenance rather than combat preparation. Our soldiers spent their service maintaining order at public events, assisting with emergency services during rare accidents, and practicing parade formations for imperial holidays. Troop morale excellent, Colonel Lucius Vaughn reported during monthly reviews. The men appreciate serving on a world where their primary responsibilities involve protecting a population that never requires protection from anything more dangerous than bureaucratic inefficiency. Medical facilities treated routine ailments, workplace injuries, and the occasional birth complications with professional competence that reflected advanced imperial medical technology applied to completely ordinary health problems. Our doctors had never encountered anything more exotic than seasonal flu outbreaks or mining-related injuries. Population health statistics well within imperial norms, Chief Medical Officer Octavia Len confirmed through quarterly reports. No unusual disease patterns or medical anomalies requiring specialized intervention. The transportation network connecting our cities and industrial sites functioned with mechanical reliability that symbolized everything admirable about Quietus Prime. Cargo haulers, passenger transports, and communications lines operated on schedules so precise that citizens could plan their entire lives around predictable service timing. Infrastructure maintenance proceeds according to standard protocols. Chief Engineer Septimus Cale reported with pride in systematic excellence, all systems functioning within optimal parameters. No equipment failures or service disruptions requiring emergency response. As I walked through Serenitas during my regular inspection tours, I felt genuine satisfaction at governing a world where every citizen knew their place, every system functioned as intended, and every day proceeded exactly as planned. Quietus Prime represented the Imperium at its most successful. Ordinary humans living productive lives under the Emperor's protection, contributing to galactic civilization without requiring heroic interventions or extraordinary sacrifices. The evening reports that concluded each day contained nothing but confirmation that another 24 hours had passed without incident, emergency, or surprise. My administrative staff prepared documentation with the mechanical precision of servants who had never encountered problems beyond routine bureaucratic complications. Another successful day of imperial governance, I would record in my personal log each night, finding genuine comfort in the absolute predictability of our world's function. Quietus Prime had achieved the perfect balance of productivity and stability that represented humanity's highest achievement. Civilization so successful that it could afford to be boring. But in the deepest levels of the Serenitas mining complex, excavation teams continued their methodical expansion into crystalline formations that pulsed with increasingly noticeable luminescence. The unusual mineral deposits were proving larger and more complex than initial surveys had indicated, extending through geological layers in patterns that suggested vast underground networks of crystalline structures. The formations appear to be natural, Chief Geologos Voss assured me during technical briefings. But they're unlike anything in our reference materials. We may need to request specialist consultation from the Adeptus Mechanicus if the excavation reveals significant complexity. The recommendation would prove to be our last opportunity to seek help before discovery became catastrophe. But at the time, the possibility that our perfectly ordinary world might contain anything genuinely dangerous seemed as remote as the threat of alien invasion or demonic incursion. Quietus Prime had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of being unremarkable. In 17 days, we would discover that unremarkable worlds could hide the most remarkable horrors, and that silence was not the absence of danger, but the sound of something vast and hungry, waiting for the right moment to whisper its first words into unsuspecting minds. Chapter 2. The First Breach. The breakthrough occurred at 0347 hours during the night shift, when minor third-class Victor Petran's excavator breached the final layer of stone separating the Serenitas deep mine from something that would transform our understanding of reality itself. What should have been another routine expansion of the excavation chamber became the moment when Quietus Prime discovered that the universe contained layers of existence our theology had never adequately prepared us to comprehend. I received the emergency communication while reviewing quarterly agricultural reports in my study. The Vox unit crackling with an urgency I hadn't heard in 37 years of planetary governance. Mine Foreman Tybalt's voice carried a confusion that violated every protocol of his methodical personality. "Governor Korven, sir. Tybalt transmitted through static that seemed to pulse with unnatural rhythm. We've encountered a situation in the deep excavation. Request immediate consultation. The rock isn't rock, sir. It's something else entirely. The words made no sense within the context of our world's perfectly catalogued geology. Every mineral formation on Quietus Prime had been surveyed, analyzed, and classified according to standard Imperial geological protocols. The possibility that our mining operations could encounter anything genuinely unknown approached mathematical impossibility. "Elaborate, Foreman," I commanded, though my administrative training provided no framework for interpreting reports of rocks that weren't rocks. "What exactly has the excavation team discovered?" I can't explain it properly, sir," Tybalt replied, his professional confidence replaced by something approaching awe. "You need to see it for yourself. The crystalline formations, they're not mineral deposits. They're something else, something that responds to our presence." The journey to the mining complex through Serenitus's empty pre-dawn streets felt like traveling through a familiar world that had somehow become foreign overnight. The hab blocks and administrative buildings remained exactly as they had been for decades, but my perception of them was altered by the knowledge that something unprecedented was occurring beneath our feet. Planetary Defense Coordinator Vex accompanied me to the mining site, his military experience providing practical expertise for evaluating potential security threats. His laser gun remained holstered, but his posture carried the alertness of a soldier who had learned to recognize when routine situations contained hidden dangers. "Could be some form of archaeotech," Vex suggested as our transport approached the mining complex. "Ancient human technology that's been dormant for millennia. The Adeptus Mechanicus has protocols for handling such discoveries." The mining complex's industrial lighting cast harsh shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources, creating visual patterns that suggested movement where none should exist. Equipment that had operated with mechanical precision for decades now produced sounds, subtle harmonics and resonant frequencies that hadn't been present during my previous inspections. "The excavation team is waiting at deep level 7, Tybalt explained, as we descended through mining shafts that felt somehow changed despite appearing physically identical to their previous configuration. "We've suspended all digging operations until technical assessment can determine safe procedures for further investigation." The elevator descent through 2.3 kilometers of solid rock provided time to contemplate the implications of discovering something genuinely unknown beneath our perfectly catalogued world. Every meter of our journey passed through geological layers that had been surveyed and mapped, with instruments that had never detected anything unusual. "Seismic readings show no structural instability," Chief Engineer Kale reported through the elevator's communication system, "but we're detecting harmonic frequencies that don't correspond to any known geological processes. The readings suggest resonance patterns, as if the rock formations are responding to acoustic stimuli." The elevator reached deep level 7 with mechanical precision that contrasted sharply with the anticipation building in my chest. 37 years of governing a world where nothing unexpected ever happened had not prepared me for situations requiring immediate decisions about genuinely unknown phenomena. "This way, Governor," Tybalt directed, leading us through excavation tunnels that extended deep into the planet's crust. Emergency lighting cast irregular shadows that created optical illusions of movement in peripheral vision, while the air circulation systems produced sounds that seemed to contain almost recognizable patterns. The excavation chamber ahead glowed with luminescence that had no obvious source. Standard mining equipment surrounded a breach in the rock wall that revealed crystalline formations extending into darkness beyond our portable illumination. But the formations weren't simply mineral deposits. They pulsed with internal light that responded to our presence with increased intensity. "It started when Petran's excavator broke through the final barrier," Tybalt explained, his voice carrying reverence for phenomena that exceeded his professional experience. "The crystalline structures began resonating immediately, and then we heard it." "Heard what?" I asked, though part of my mind already suspected the answer would challenge assumptions about reality that I had accepted without question for 5 decades of life. "The Whisper," Tybalt replied, his words carrying weight that seemed to press against consciousness itself. A voice that speaks without sound, coming from elsewhere. "It knows things, Governor. Things about us. Things about our world. Things that no mineral formation should be capable of knowing." The crystalline breach extended several meters into the excavation chamber wall, revealing structures that resembled organic growth patterns more than geological formations. The crystals pulsed with rhythmic luminescence that seemed to synchronize with heartbeat patterns, while their surfaces reflected light in ways that created depth illusions, suggesting vast spaces beyond the physical barriers. "Spectral analysis is inconclusive," Chief Geologist Voss reported, his scientific training struggling to process data that violated fundamental assumptions about mineral composition. The crystalline structures register as matter, but they also show energy patterns that shouldn't be possible in solid mineral forms. As we approached the breach, the whisper became audible, not through hearing, but through direct perception that bypassed normal sensory channels. It spoke in a language that was simultaneously incomprehensible and perfectly understandable, conveying meaning through emotional resonance rather than linguistic structures. "Welcome, children of the silent world." The whisper conveyed concepts that translated themselves automatically into comprehension. "Welcome to the discovery that isolation is an illusion, and silence is merely ignorance of the cosmic conversation that surrounds all existence." The voice carried infinite patience combined with hunger that seemed to span cosmic timescales. It felt ancient beyond measure, but also eternally present, as if it had been waiting specifically for this moment when Quietus Prime would finally join the galactic dialogue we had unknowingly avoided for millennia. What is it?" Vex asked, his military training providing no framework for evaluating threats that communicated through direct mental contact. His hand remained near his lasgun, though conventional weapons seemed inadequate for addressing dangers that existed partially outside normal physical reality. "I am the echo of thoughts you have never learned to think." The whisper responded to questions before they were fully formulated. "I am the voice of possibilities your isolation has never allowed you to explore. I am the first word in conversations your world is only now prepared to begin." The crystalline formations pulsed with increasing intensity as the whisper continued, their luminescence creating patterns that seemed to contain information. Not visual data that could be interpreted intellectually, but knowledge that impressed itself directly onto consciousness without requiring conventional understanding. It's teaching us," mining engineer Morse observed, his technical expertise detecting structured information transfer occurring through the crystal resonance patterns. The formations are transmitting data through harmonic frequencies that bypass normal sensory processing. The lesson being transmitted was both simple and terrifying. Quietus Prime's isolation from the galaxy's supernatural phenomena had been an anomaly rather than the natural state. The crystalline breach connected our world to vast networks of consciousness that existed between the dimensions of normal space-time. "Your species calls it the warp." The whisper explained concepts that our theology had mentioned but never adequately described. The realm of souls and possibilities that exists beneath and beyond the material universe. "Your world has remained isolated through accident rather than design, but isolation cannot be maintained indefinitely. Through the crystal formations, I began to perceive glimpses of the warp itself, an infinite ocean of psychic energy where thoughts became reality and consciousness shaped existence through will alone. It was beautiful and terrible simultaneously, containing every possibility that mortal minds could imagine and many that exceeded all imagination." This is what the Imperial Creed warns against," Chief Adept Grex whispered, his administrative training providing theological context for phenomena that challenged everything our world had believed about the nature of reality. "Contact with the Imperium. Exposure to psychic influences that threaten human sanity." But the whisper carried no malevolence, only patient explanation of truths that had existed long before human civilization achieved space travel. The warp was not inherently evil. It was simply a dimension where consciousness operated according to different rules. where thought and emotion possessed creative power that could reshape reality itself. Fear is appropriate. The whisper acknowledged our rising terror with something approaching sympathy. But fear is also limitation. Your species has achieved remarkable things through isolation from psychic influence, but isolation has also constrained your development. The time has come for growth. Come. The crystalline formations began displaying visual patterns that showed us Quietus Prime from perspectives we had never considered. We saw our world as it appeared from the warp dimension, a sphere of silence floating in an ocean of psychic energy, protected by barriers that were beginning to weaken after millennia of gradual degradation. The barriers are natural, I asked, though the question emerged more as desperate hope than genuine inquiry. Nothing about your world's isolation was natural, the whisper corrected with gentle finality. Your planet was artificially shielded during the Age of Strife by technologies your ancestors have forgotten. The shields are failing because they were never meant to last forever. Your discovery of this breach is not accident, but inevitability. The revelation transformed our understanding of Quietus Prime's history. Our world's remarkable stability hadn't been the result of fortunate location or exceptional imperial governance. We had been living inside artificial barriers that had protected us from psychic influences that affected every other human world in the galaxy. "How long do we have?" Vex asked, his military instincts focusing on practical questions about timeline and preparation. "The barriers will complete their degradation within 17 days. The whisper responded with mathematical precision that suggested cosmic calculations beyond human comprehension. 17 days for your population to choose between gradual adaptation to psychic reality or psychological trauma caused by sudden exposure to influences they cannot understand. The timeline was simultaneously generous and impossible. 17 days to prepare 2.7 billion people for contact with supernatural forces that imperial doctrine taught were among the greatest threats to human survival. 17 days to transform a culture built on predictability and safety into something capable of surviving direct exposure to the warp. "What happens if we're not ready?" Chief Medical Officer Len asked, her professional responsibility extending to the health of our entire population. "Some will adapt naturally." The whisper explained outcomes that ranged from miraculous to catastrophic. Perhaps 10% of your population possesses latent psychic potential that will manifest as abilities rather than madness. 20% will experience psychological disruption but retain basic functionality. The remainder, the silence that followed, contained more information than words could have provided. 70% of our population would face mental trauma ranging from severe psychological dysfunction to complete psychotic breakdown. The whisper was offering us advance warning of a transformation that would devastate our civilization even if we prepared perfectly. "Evacuation?" I asked, though the logistics of relocating 2.7 billion people in 17 days exceeded any conceivable imperial response capability. "Impossible," the whisper confirmed, "and unnecessary. Adaptation is possible, but it requires acceptance rather than resistance. Your people must learn to hear psychic whispers without losing themselves in the cosmic conversation." As the implications of our situation crystallized, the excavation chamber filled with the sound of minds beginning to process possibilities that exceeded normal human experience. We were witnessing the moment when Quietus Prime discovered that the universe was far stranger and more dangerous than our isolated civilization had ever suspected. The whisper continued its patient explanation of realities that would soon transform our world, while the crystalline formations pulsed with increasing intensity as the barriers protecting our planet continued their inexorable degradation toward complete failure. Quietus Prime had 17 days to learn how to hear the warp whisper without losing its sanity in the process. Chapter 3. The Spreading Awareness. The first signs of spreading psychic influence became apparent within 6 hours of our initial contact with the crystalline breach, manifesting as subtle changes in behavior patterns that our psychological monitoring systems had never been designed to detect. Citizens across Serenitas began experiencing dreams that contained information they couldn't possibly have known, while others reported hearing distant voices during moments of quiet contemplation. I had returned to the governor's palace to coordinate planetary response efforts, but concentration proved impossible as fragments of alien thoughts began infiltrating my consciousness during routine administrative tasks. The whisper from the crystalline formations had awakened something in my mind that created awareness of psychic influences I had been unconsciously ignoring for decades. "Governor, sir," Chief Administrative Officer Grex reported during our emergency briefing, his usually precise demeanor affected by a subtle disorientation that suggested his consciousness was also adapting to expanded perception. "We're receiving unusual reports from multiple civilian sectors. Citizens requesting consultations for experiences they're describing as waking visions and voices of guidance." The reports arrived in steadily increasing numbers as our communication systems struggled to process inquiries about phenomena that had no precedent in Quietus Prime's recorded history. Citizens called to describe dreams that provided detailed technical knowledge they had never studied, while others reported sudden insights into problems they had been struggling with for months. Medical facilities are requesting guidance for treating patients who claim to be receiving information from external sources, Chief Medical Officer Len added to the briefing materials. The patients show no signs of psychological dysfunction, but they're describing experiences that fall outside normal perceptual categories. The pattern emerging from the reports suggested that exposure to psychic influences was not uniformly traumatic. Approximately 10% of our population appeared to be developing genuine extrasensory abilities, while another 20% experienced enhanced intuition and problem-solving capabilities. The remainder showed varying degrees of discomfort with unexplained sensory experiences. The industrial sectors report increased efficiency in problem-solving activities. Chief Engineer Kale observed through data analysis that revealed productivity improvements across multiple operational categories. Workers are identifying mechanical issues before diagnostic equipment detects them and suggesting solutions that exceed their technical training. The phenomenon was spreading beyond individual consciousness to affect group dynamics and collaborative processes. Teams working on complex projects began achieving coordination that exceeded their previous capabilities, while decision-making processes showed improvements that suggested access to information beyond conventional analysis. Educational facilities report students demonstrating knowledge that exceeds curriculum materials. Education Supervisor Cray added to the expanding catalogue of unusual developments. Children are providing accurate answers to questions they haven't been taught and showing understanding of concepts that should require years of advanced education. But the most significant changes were occurring in our religious institutions, where Cardinal Korven reported that prayer and worship were developing interactive elements that challenged traditional theological understanding. Citizens described receiving responses to devotional activities, not auditory communications, but direct transmission of spiritual insight that enhanced their faith in unprecedented ways. The Emperor's presence feels more immediate, Cardinal Korven explained during confidential consultation about theological implications. Our congregation reports experiencing divine guidance that provides specific direction for daily decisions. It's consistent with imperial doctrine, but the intensity is beyond anything in our religious experience. The pattern suggested that the warp influences affecting our world were not chaotic or malevolent, but instead were enhancing existing human capabilities in ways that aligned with our culture's fundamental values. Citizens were becoming more effective at their existing responsibilities, rather than developing entirely new characteristics that conflicted with social stability. Recommend expansion of monitoring protocols to track developing patterns, I ordered, recognizing that our response strategy would need to adapt based on actual rather than theoretical consequences of psychic exposure. If our population is adapting successfully, our preparation efforts should support natural development rather than attempting to prevent unavoidable changes. The crystalline formations in the deep mine continued serving as focal points for the spreading influence, their luminescence visible from surface levels as psychic energies permeated the geological structures of our world. Technical teams monitoring the excavation site reported that the crystal resonance patterns were becoming more complex and informative as additional consciousness connected to the psychic network. The formations appear to be facilitating communication between individual minds. Chief Geologist Voss reported through analysis that combined conventional mineralogy with unprecedented psychic phenomena. Citizens throughout Serenitas are beginning to share thoughts and insights through harmonic resonance that uses the crystalline structures as transmission medium. The development represented the emergence of limited telepathic abilities among our population, but the communication was subtle and voluntary rather than invasive or uncontrolled. Citizens could sense each other's emotional states and general thoughts, but private consciousness remained protected from unwanted intrusion. Social dynamics are improving rather than deteriorating, planetary sociologist Vera Darn observed through behavioral analysis of civilian interactions. Interpersonal conflicts are decreasing as people develop empathic awareness of each other's perspectives. Cooperative problem-solving is increasing across all demographic categories. The unexpected positive outcomes challenged every assumption about psychic exposure that Imperial doctrine had taught us to expect. Instead of madness and chaos, our population was developing enhanced social capabilities that strengthened community cohesion rather than threatening individual autonomy. Communication efficiency between administrative departments has increased by 340%. Grex reported through productivity metrics that reflected organizational improvements across governmental operations. Decision-making processes are faster and more accurate due to enhanced information sharing between personnel. But the changes were not uniform across our population, and some citizens experienced difficulties adapting to expanded sensory perception that included awareness of psychic phenomena. Medical facilities began treating patients whose consciousness was overwhelmed by sudden exposure to information and sensations they couldn't integrate effectively. Approximately 7% of the population is experiencing adaptation stress, Chief Medical Officer Len reported, through clinical assessments of citizens struggling with psychic awakening. Symptoms include sensory overload, decision paralysis, and anxiety about loss of mental privacy. These individuals require specialized support to manage expanding consciousness. The medical interventions focused on helping affected citizens develop mental techniques for regulating psychic sensitivity, rather than attempting to suppress abilities that appeared to be permanent biological adaptations. Success rates improved as our healthcare professionals developed experience treating conditions that had no precedent in medical literature. The children adapt most easily, Education Supervisor Cray observed through reports from schools where young citizens demonstrated remarkable facility with psychic abilities. Students below age 15 show natural comfort with telepathic communication and enhanced problem-solving capabilities. They're integrating psychic awareness into their normal cognitive development. The generational differences in adaptation suggested that younger minds possessed neuroplasticity that facilitated integration of psychic abilities, while older consciousness required more time and support to accommodate expanded sensory perception. Educational curricula were modified to include instruction in psychic awareness and mental discipline techniques. Agricultural productivity shows improvement due to enhanced environmental awareness. Agricultural Coordinator Maximus Toll reported through farming sector analysis that revealed unexpected benefits of psychic exposure. Farmers are detecting plant diseases earlier and predicting weather patterns with unprecedented accuracy. The agricultural improvements reflected one of many practical applications of developing psychic abilities that enhanced, rather than disrupted, our world's economic foundations. Citizens were discovering that expanded consciousness provided advantages for existing activities rather than requiring abandonment of traditional lifestyles. Mining operations report increased safety and efficiency. Mineforeman Tybolt added through technical assessments of industrial sectors adapting to psychic enhancement. Workers can sense geological instabilities before conventional instruments detect them and coordinate excavation activities with improved precision. The mining improvements were particularly significant given that the crystalline formations remained the epicenter of psychic influence affecting our world. Workers in direct contact with the formations developed the strongest psychic abilities, while also showing the greatest skill in managing those abilities responsibly. Recommend acceleration of adaptation support programs, I decided, recognizing that our population was successfully integrating psychic awareness at rates that exceeded our most optimistic projections. Focus resources on assisting the minority experiencing difficulties rather than trying to prevent changes that are proving beneficial for the majority. But as day 3 of our transformation progressed, monitoring systems detected subtle changes in the crystalline formations that suggested escalating psychic activity beyond our current experience levels. The resonance patterns were becoming more complex, while the luminescence was increasing in intensity as additional consciousness connected to the psychic network. Energy readings from the excavation site are approaching critical thresholds. Chief Engineer Kale warned through technical analysis that revealed potential safety concerns. The crystalline structures are channeling increasing amounts of psychic energy as more citizens develop telepathic connections. We may need to consider containment protocols. The warning highlighted potential risks that our successful adaptation had temporarily obscured. While our population was managing current levels of psychic exposure effectively, the continuing degradation of protective barriers meant that influence intensities would continue increasing toward levels that might exceed human adaptation capabilities. Consultation with Imperial authorities? Planetary Defense Coordinator Vex suggested, his military experience recognizing situations that might require external expertise beyond our local capabilities. The question raised complex considerations about revealing our situation to Imperial institutions, whose standard response to psychic phenomena involved purging populations that showed signs of unauthorized contact with warp influences. Our successful adaptation might not be sufficient to prevent classification as a corrupted world requiring exterminatus. Delay external contact until we understand the full scope of our transformation, I ordered, accepting the risk that isolation might prove dangerous, but recognizing that premature revelation might guarantee destruction. We have 14 days remaining before barrier collapse. Use that time to determine whether our adaptation will prove sustainable. As evening approached on the 3rd day of our psychic awakening, Quietus Prime had achieved remarkable progress in developing abilities that enhanced rather than threatened our civilization. But the crystalline formations continued pulsing with increasing intensity, while the whisper grew stronger each hour as barriers protecting our world continued their inexorable degradation. The question was no longer whether our population could adapt to psychic exposure, but whether we could maintain the controlled, beneficial development we had achieved once the protective barriers failed completely and exposed us to the full intensity of warp influence. Our successful first steps into the galaxy's psychic reality had given us hope that adaptation was possible, but the true test still lay ahead when Quietus Prime would hear the warp whisper at full volume for the first time in our world's history.